The ropes burned into her wrists as the Arizona sun climbed higher, turning the desert into an oven of dust and death. Håkon Blacktalon had tracked crows for 20 years across these badlands, but nothing prepared him for what he found staked to the ground that morning. A white woman left to die under a punishment his own people had abandoned generations ago. The silver locket around her neck caught the light, and in that flash of recognition, he saw the face of someone he'd buried 15 years before. The black-winged shapes circled lazily against the pale morning sky, their harsh cries echoing across the canyon walls like warnings from the spirit world. Håkon Blacktalon moved through the scrub brush with practiced silence, his weathered moccasins finding purchase on stones that would betray a white man's presence with a single misplaced step. At 43 winters, his body still carried the lean strength of youth, though silver had begun threading through the long black hair he kept bound with a strip of leather at the nape of his neck. The hunting rifle across his back was a concession to changing times. But the bone-handled knife at his belt had been his grandfather's, and his grandfather's before that. Håkon was Chiricahua Apache, though that name meant less with each passing year, as the reservations swallowed his people whole, and the old ways faded like morning mist. He had chosen a different path than most, neither fully embracing the white man's world, nor remaining bound to the reservation that had become a prison for so many of his kind. Instead, he lived in the borderlands, hunting crows for their feathers, which he sold to traders in the settlements, and occasionally guiding foolish prospectors through terrain that had killed better men. It was a solitary existence, but solitude had become his companion after the massacre at Silver Creek. The crows were gathering in unusual numbers today, more than a dozen circling a spot perhaps half a mile to the northeast. Håkon altered his course, curiosity overcoming his original intent to check the snares he'd set near the dry creek bed. Crows gathered for death, for carrion, for things the living preferred not to witness. As he climbed the rocky slope that would give him a vantage point over the basin below, the morning heat was already building, promising another day where the sun would bake the land until even the lizards sought shelter. When he reached the ridgeline and looked down into the shallow basin, Håkon froze. His breath caught in his chest, and for a moment he thought the heat was already playing tricks with his vision. But no, the scene below was terribly, impossibly real. A woman lay spread-eagled on the hard-packed earth, her wrists and ankles bound to iron stakes driven deep into the ground. Even from this distance, he could see the unnatural angle of her limbs, stretched taut by ropes that had been tied with deliberate cruelty. Her dress, once fine fabric by the look of it, was torn and stained with blood and dirt. The crows were perched on nearby rocks, waiting with the patience of scavengers who knew their meal would come. Håkon's jaw tightened. He recognized this punishment, though he had never seen it inflicted in his lifetime: sun staking. The ancient sentence his people had once used for the worst betrayals, reserved for those who sold out their own tribe or murdered without cause. But that practice had been abandoned long before his birth, relegated to the frightening stories elders told children to teach them about justice and consequence. To see it here now in 1887 was like watching a ghost walk. He scanned the surrounding terrain with the careful attention of a man who had survived this long by trusting his instincts. No signs of observers, no dust trails suggesting recent riders, no glint of metal from a hidden watcher. Whoever had done this had left the woman to die alone, as was the terrible purpose of the punishment. 3 days under the desert sun, without water or shelter, would kill even the strongest man. A woman of her slight build might not last 2. Håkon made his decision quickly. He began his descent, moving from cover to cover, despite seeing no immediate threat, old habits too ingrained to abandon. As he drew closer, details emerged that made his gut twist. The woman's face was blistered and raw from sun exposure, her lips cracked and bleeding. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, the desperate panting of a body pushed beyond its limits. But she was alive, and that meant he still had time. 20 feet away, he paused, listening. Nothing but the whisper of hot wind across stone and the occasional cry of the waiting crows. He approached the woman directly now, no longer concealing his presence. Her eyes were closed, sunken in her skull, and he thought perhaps she had already slipped beyond consciousness. Then as his shadow fell across her face, those eyes opened. They were blue, pale as winter ice, and in them Hakan saw not fear, but a desperate, fierce determination to survive. The woman's cracked lips moved, forming words that came out as barely more than a whisper. "Please, loosen the ropes." Her voice was raw, destroyed by screaming or thirst or both. "Please, I'm begging you." Hakan knelt beside her, his shadow providing merciful relief from the sun's assault. Up close, he could see she was perhaps 30 years old, with features that spoke of Eastern refinement rather than frontier hardship. Her hair, matted and filthy now, had once been carefully styled. The torn dress had been expensive, with pearl buttons and careful stitching. This was no common settler woman or saloon girl. Someone of means had ended up here, left to die in the most brutal way imaginable. Who did this? Hakan asked in English, though his accent carried the musical cadence of his native tongue. His hand moved to his knife, ready to cut her bonds. But he needed to know what threat might be waiting. The woman's eyes focused on his face, taking in his long black hair, the copper tone of his skin, the traditional beadwork on his leather vest. Recognition and something else, something like hope, flickered across her features. "Judge Cornelius Whitlock," she managed, each word an obvious agony. "Said I was a thief. Said this was frontier justice for those who steal from men of standing." Hakan's hand stilled on the knife handle. Whitlock, he knew that name. Knew it, the way a man knows the smell of poison or the sound of a rattlesnake's warning. Judge Cornelius Whitlock had arrived in the Arizona Territory 5 years ago, bringing with him the weight of Eastern law and the cold certainty that civilization would be imposed on the wilderness, whether the wilderness wanted it or not. He had established himself in the settlement of Redemption 30 miles south, and from that base had extended his influence across half the territory. Whitlock was known for harsh sentences, for public displays of punishment meant to cow the populace into submission, and for a particular hatred of anyone who challenged his authority. But this was something beyond harsh justice. This was cruelty wearing the mask of law. "What did you steal?" Hakan asked, beginning to cut the rope at her right wrist. The fibers parted under his sharp blade, and the woman gasped as blood flow returned to her hand. "Nothing," she whispered, and there was such conviction in that broken voice that Hakan believed her. "I saw something. In his office, papers, records of people he sold, my people. White settlers who disappeared, their land claimed by Whitlock's associates. He called it consolidation of resources. I called it murder and theft." Hakan moved to her left wrist, cutting those bonds as well. As her arms came free, the woman tried to sit up, but fell back with a cry of pain. Her muscles had been stretched for hours, perhaps more than a day, and would not obey her commands. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, keeping her still. "Don't move yet," he instructed, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to treating injuries in the field. "Your body needs time to remember how to work." He pulled his water skin from his belt and carefully lifted her head, allowing her to take small sips. Too much too fast would make her sick, possibly kill her in her weakened state. While she drank, Hakan cut the ropes at her ankles, noting the deep grooves they had worn into her flesh. Infection was a certainty if these wounds weren't cleaned and treated soon. As the last rope parted, the woman's body curled instinctively into a protective ball, a whimper of pain escaping her lips as traumatized muscles contracted. "Easy," Hakan murmured, his hands hovering near but not touching, giving her space to adjust. "The pain will fade. You're safe now." "Safe," the woman repeated, and a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob rasped from her throat. "No one is safe from Whitlock. He owns the sheriff. He owns the territorial marshal. He owns half the businesses in Redemption and controls the water rights for every ranch within 50 miles. Cross him and you end up like this." She gestured weakly at the stakes still driven into the ground, at the ropes that had held her captive. Hakan sat back on his heels, considering the situation with the careful deliberation that had kept him alive through 43 dangerous years. By cutting her free, he had already involved himself in something that would have consequences. Whitlock was not a man who would accept this interference lightly. But leaving her to die had never been an option. Not from the moment he'd seen her bound to the earth like an animal sacrifice. His eyes fell on the locket around her neck, a silver oval that had somehow survived her ordeal. It was fine work, Eastern craftsmanship, with delicate engraving around the edge. Something about it tugged at his memory, but he couldn't quite place why. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she managed, her voice growing stronger with each sip of water. "Lily Harrington. I came to Redemption 6 months ago as a teacher. The town needed someone to educate the children, and I needed a fresh start after my father died back in Boston." Her pale eyes met his. "What's yours?" "Hakan," he replied. Hakan Blacktalon. He didn't elaborate on his tribal affiliation or his reasons for living alone in the Badlands. Those details could wait. Lily's gaze sharpened despite her obvious pain and exhaustion. "Blacktalon. I've heard that name. Some of the Apache children who came to my school, before Whitlock banned them, spoke of a crow hunter who lived in the canyons. Said he was one of the old blood, one who remembered the ways before the reservations." "The children talk too much," Hakan said, but there was no anger in his words. He began examining her injuries more carefully now, noting the sunburns that would blister and peel, the dehydration that hollowed her cheeks, the rope burns at wrists and ankles that wept clear fluid. She needed shelter, more water, food if her stomach could handle it, and treatment for wounds that would fester in this heat. "Can you ride?" he asked. Lily tried to flex her legs and winced. "I don't know. Maybe if you help me." "My horse is a quarter-mile from here," Hakan said, making his decision. "I'll carry you." Before she could protest, he slid his arms beneath her shoulders and knees, lifting her with the ease of a man accustomed to carrying heavy game through rough terrain. She weighed almost nothing, her body depleted by the ordeal. As he stood, cradling her against his chest, Lily's hand moved instinctively to the locket at her throat. The gesture was protective, possessive, and it triggered something in Hakan's memory. He had seen that locket before, or one very like it. But where? The walk back to his horse was slow, Hakan choosing his footing carefully to avoid jostling his burden more than necessary. Lily drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring words he couldn't quite catch. Once she said a name, Thomas, with such longing that Hakan knew he was hearing the echo of deep loss. His horse, a sturdy paint gelding named Takoda, waited patiently where he'd left it tied to a juniper. The animal's ears pricked forward at their approach, nostrils flaring to catch their scent. Hakan had trained the horse well. It didn't startle as he lifted Lily onto its back, then swung up behind her. She sagged against him, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady while guiding Takoda with his other hand. The ride to his camp took 2 hours, following game trails and dry washes that no wagon could navigate. This was Apache country, though few Apaches remained free to claim it. Most had been driven onto the reservations or hunted down by the army, those like Hakan, who lived in the spaces between the white man's world and the old ways, were tolerated as long as they caused no trouble. His camp was tucked into a box canyon where a spring fed a small pool of clear water, one of the few reliable water sources in this section of the Badlands. A wickiup, the traditional Apache dwelling of bent branches and brush, provided shelter, and nearby was a small corral where he kept Takoda when not ranging far afield. It was a simple life, but it was his own, and he had been content with it until now. Until a half-dead white woman with a silver locket brought trouble riding in on her heels. Hakan dismounted and carefully lowered Lily to the ground near the spring. She was conscious again, her eyes tracking his movements as he unsaddled Takoda and led the horse to water. Then he returned to her with clean cloths and a small clay pot of salve made from desert plants. a recipe his grandmother had taught him. "This will hurt," he warned before beginning to clean the rope burns at her wrists. Lily bit her lip, but didn't cry out as he worked, washing away dried blood and dirt before applying the salve. The mixture would fight infection and speed healing, but the process was painful. When he finished with her wrists and moved to her ankles, she finally spoke. "Why are you helping me?" The question was direct, her pale eyes searching his face for answers. "You don't know me. My people have done terrible things to yours, and helping me means making an enemy of Whitlock, which could get you killed or driven from your home." Hakan paused in his work, considering how to answer. Finally he said, "My people have a saying. The man who turns away from suffering when he has the power to prevent it carries a wound that never heals. I saw you. I had the power to help. So I did." He resumed tending her wounds. "The rest we'll deal with as it comes." "The rest will come quickly," Lily said grimly. "Whitlock left me there to die, but he'll have men watching to make sure no one interferes. When I don't die as planned, he'll come looking." "Let him come," Hakan replied, though he knew the situation was more complicated than such simple defiance suggested. Whitlock's reach was long, and his reputation for crushing anyone who opposed him was well earned. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Hakan helped Lily into the shade of the wickiup and gave her more water, along with some dried meat that she chewed slowly, her jaw working with difficulty. While she ate, he studied the silver locket again, the nagging sense of recognition growing stronger. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the locket. Lily's hand moved protectively to cover it, but after a moment she nodded. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp, still clumsy from trauma, and Hakan gently took over, opening the delicate piece of jewelry. Inside were two small portraits, miniatures painted with exquisite skill. One showed a man in his 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. The other showed a young woman, barely more than a girl, with long dark hair and features that mixed white and Apache heritage. Hakan's breath caught in his throat. He knew that face. Knew it as well as he knew his own, because he had seen it every day for 3 years before the massacre at Silver Creek. "Where did you get this?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, sharp with an emotion he thought he'd buried 15 years ago. Lily, sensing the change in him, looked confused. "It was my father's. That's him in the one portrait. The other is my half-sister from his first marriage to an Apache woman. Her name was Ayana. She died when I was very young in some kind of raid. I never knew her, but father carried this locket until the day he died. It's all I have left of my family." The world seemed to tilt beneath Hakan's feet. Ayana, his wife. The woman he had loved with every fiber of his being, who had taught him that love could bridge the divide between their peoples. She had been the daughter of a trader and an Apache woman, raised in both worlds, fluent in both languages. They had married when he was 25 and she was 19, and for 3 perfect years they had built a life together in a small settlement called Silver Creek. Then the raiders had come. White men wearing masks, burning and killing, taking what they wanted and destroying what they couldn't carry. Hakan had been away, hunting in the mountains, when they struck. He returned to find Silver Creek in ashes, his wife among the dead. The traders had told him there were no survivors, that everyone had been killed or taken. But if Lily was Ayana's half-sister, then Ayana's father, the white trader Thomas Harrington, must have survived. And he had carried his daughter's image in a locket for 15 years, never knowing that her husband still lived, still mourned, still carried the weight of failing to protect her. "Your father," Hakan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas Harrington. He was your father." "Yes," Lily confirmed, studying him with growing intensity. "Did you know him?" "I knew his daughter," Hakan replied, the words dragging themselves from some deep place he had sealed off long ago. "Ayana was my wife." The silence that fell between them was profound, weighted with 15 years of grief and loss and paths that had diverged in blood and fire. Lily stared at him, her pale eyes wide with shock and something that might have been recognition of destiny's strange workings. "Then you're my brother-in-law," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Your family." The word hung in the air between them, transforming everything. Hakan had helped her because it was right, because leaving her to die would have violated everything he believed. But now there was a connection deeper than simple morality, a bond forged in tragedy and loss that neither of them had known existed until this moment. "Tell me about Ayana," Lily said softly. "Father never spoke of her much. It hurt him too deeply, but I need to know. I need to understand who she was." And so, as the desert sun beat down on the canyon walls and the spring burbled its eternal song, Hakan Blacktalon began to speak of his dead wife, of a love that had crossed the boundaries his people and hers had drawn in blood, and of the massacre that had stolen her from the world. He spoke, and Lily Harrington listened, and between them the silver locket caught the light like a promise that some connections survive even death itself. The shadows had grown long across the canyon floor by the time Hakan finished speaking of Ayana. Lily sat propped against the Wiki-Up support poles, her sunburned face streaked with tears that cut clean lines through the dust and grime. She had listened without interruption as he described her half-sister, the woman she had never known but whose blood ran in her veins. Ayana had been a bridge between worlds, fluent in 3 languages, skilled in both Apache healing traditions and the white man's medicine her father had taught her. She had believed that understanding could triumph over hatred, that 2 peoples could learn to see each other as human rather than enemy. "She sounds remarkable," Lily said when Hakan finally fell silent. "Father used to say she had a gift for making people see past their prejudices. He blamed himself for her death, you know. Said if he hadn't encouraged her to stay in Silver Creek, if he'd insisted she return east with him when things got dangerous, she might still be alive." Hakan shook his head slowly. "Ayana would never have left. She believed Silver Creek could be a model for how our peoples might coexist. She was teaching Apache children to read English and white children to understand our ways. The settlement was small, maybe 40 families, but it was working. People were learning to trust each other." His jaw tightened. "That's probably why they destroyed it." "None, they." Lily leaned forward despite the pain the movement caused. "You said raiders, but you mean something more specific, don't you?" Hakan rose and moved to the edge of the Wiki-Up, staring out at the desert that was turning amber and gold in the fading light. "The men who attacked Silver Creek wore masks, but I talked to survivors from other settlements that were hit around the same time. Same pattern. They'd come at night, burn everything, kill anyone who resisted, and take anything of value. But it wasn't random violence. They targeted specific places, settlements, where Apache and white families were living peacefully together, trading freely without going through the territorial authorities." Understanding dawned in Lily's eyes. Someone was eliminating competition, someone who profited from controlling trade and maintaining division between your people and mine. "I spent 2 years tracking rumors and following cold trails," Hakan continued, his voice hard with old anger. "Every path led back to the same name, though I could never prove it. Judge Cornelius Whitlock. He wasn't a judge then, just a territorial administrator with ambitions and connections back east. But he had the resources to hire raiders and the authority to make sure no one investigated too closely. When frontier settlements burned," Lily's hand moved to the locket at her throat, her fingers tracing its engraved surface. "Then what happened to me, this wasn't random cruelty. Whitlock recognized my father's name when I arrived in Redemption. He knew exactly who I was." "Tell me what you saw in his office," Hakan said, turning back to face her. "What papers were worth killing you over?" Lily took a steadying breath, organizing her thoughts. "I'd been teaching in Redemption for 5 months. Whitlock seemed pleased to have an educated woman bringing civilization to the frontier, as he put it. He invited me to social functions, introduced me to the town's influential families. I thought he was being welcoming." Her expression darkened. 3 weeks ago, he asked me to catalogue some legal documents in his office. Said his clerk had fallen behind and he needed someone with a neat hand and attention to detail. A test, Hakan observed. Want to see if you could be trusted, or to see if I was too curious, Lily agreed. The documents he wanted catalogued were property deeds and transfer papers, routine legal work. But while I was filing them, I found a ledger that had been left open on his desk. It contained names, dates, and amounts of money. At first, I thought it was an account book, but then I started recognizing the names. Jacob Thornton disappeared 2 years ago, his ranch now owned by one of Whitlock's associates. The Brennan family, killed in what was called an Apache raid, their water rights now controlled by Whitlock's land development company. Sarah Chen, the Chinese woman who ran the general store, vanished last year, her property sold at auction to pay supposed debts. Hakan felt cold certainty settling in his gut. How many names? 43, Lily said, her voice shaking with suppressed fury. 43 people who disappeared or died under suspicious circumstances, every single one leaving property or resources that ended up in Whitlock's control. And beside each name was a number. I think it was what he paid to have them eliminated. You took the ledger, Hakan guessed. Lily shook her head. I didn't have time. Whitlock returned while I was still reading it. He saw my face, knew immediately that I'd understood what I was looking at. He was so calm about it, almost amused. He said frontier justice sometimes required difficult decisions, that weak people had to make way for those with the vision and strength to build something lasting. Then he called his men. How long ago? 2 days. They held me in a root cellar overnight, then brought me out here before dawn. Whitlock himself tied the ropes. Lily's voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said my father had been a fool who wasted his life trying to bridge unbridgeable divides. He said Ayana got what she deserved for polluting white blood with savage taint. He said I would die slowly the way she did, and it would serve as an object lesson to anyone else who might think about interfering in his business. Rage, white-hot and consuming, flared in Hakan's chest. For 15 years he had suspected Whitlock's involvement in Ayana's death, but had never been able to prove it. Now he had confirmation from the man's own mouth, spoken to the sister of the woman Hakan had loved. The circle was closing, drawn in blood and sealed with cruelty. We need to get that ledger, he said, forcing his voice to remain level. Without it, this is your word against a territorial judge. No one will believe you. The ledger will be gone by now, Lily countered. Whitlock's not stupid. He'll have destroyed it the moment he knew I'd seen it. Maybe, or maybe his arrogance will work against him. Men like Whitlock keep records because they believe they're untouchable. That ledger represents 15 years of careful planning and execution. He might not be able to bring himself to destroy it. Hakan began gathering supplies, his movements quick and purposeful. Either way, we need to know what we're facing. You're going to redemption, Lily said, reading his intent. That's suicide. Whitlock has 20 men loyal to him, and the whole town is under his thumb. You'll be arrested or shot the moment you're recognized. Then I won't be recognized. Hakan pulled a bundle from a leather sack in the corner of the wiki-up. When he shook it out, Lily saw it was white man's clothing, worn but serviceable trail clothes of the kind any frontier drifter might wear. I've had to move through white settlements before. No one looks twice at another half-breed trying to pass for Mexican or Spanish. And me. Lily struggled to sit up straighter. You can't leave me here defenseless if Whitlock sends men looking. You're in no condition to travel, Hakan said firmly. You can barely walk, and riding would open those rope burns all over again. Infection would kill you as surely as Whitlock would. He saw the protest forming on her lips and held up a hand. But you're right that staying here unprotected is dangerous. There's another option. What option? Hakan hesitated, knowing the complication he was about to introduce. 3 miles north of here is the winter camp of my mother's clan. About 30 people. Mostly elders and children, since the young warriors are all dead or on the reservation. They'll give you shelter. Will they welcome a white woman? Lily asked quietly. Given what my people have done to yours. You're not just a white woman anymore, Hakan replied. You're Ayana's sister. That makes you family, and family is sacred. Besides, my mother knew Ayana, loved her like a daughter. When she learns who you are, she'll protect you with her life. But there's a cost, Lily said, reading the tension in his shoulders. You said another option, like it's something you've been avoiding. What aren't you telling me? Hakan sat down across from her, his dark eyes holding hers. I've been away from the clan for 8 years. After Ayana died, I couldn't stay. The grief was too much, and I blamed myself for not being there to protect her. My mother understood, but the elders didn't. They said I was abandoning my responsibilities, turning my back on our people when they needed every warrior. There was an argument. Hard words were spoken. When I left, the eldest, a man named Niol, said if I walked away, I shouldn't come back. That I would no longer be considered part of the clan. So bringing me there means facing banishment, Lily concluded. You'll be breaking some kind of law or tradition by returning. Possibly, probably. Hakan's expression was grim. But it's the only place within 2 days' travel where you'll be safe from Whitlock. And if I'm being honest, it's time I faced what I ran from 8 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Lily was quiet for a long moment, her pale eyes studying his face with an intensity that reminded him achingly of Ayana. Finally, she said, You've already sacrificed so much by cutting me free. I won't ask you to give up your place among your people as well. Leave me here with supplies and a weapon. I'll take my chances. That's not a choice I'm willing to make, Hakan said flatly. We do this together or not at all. Why? The question was sharp, demanding honesty. You didn't know about our connection when you freed me. You helped a stranger at great personal risk. Now you're willing to face banishment from your own people to protect me further. Why? Hakan considered his answer carefully. 8 years ago, I ran from pain instead of facing it. I chose isolation over community, solitude over responsibility. It's kept me alive, but it hasn't made me whole. Maybe this is the universe giving me a chance to choose differently, to honor Ayana's memory by protecting her sister, to finish what I should have finished 15 years ago, stopping Whitlock before he can destroy more lives. He paused. Or maybe I'm just tired of being alone. The raw honesty in his words seemed to reach something in Lily. She nodded slowly. Then we go to your mother's clan, and afterward we make Whitlock pay for what he's done. They prepared to leave as the last light faded from the sky. Hakan had decided to travel by night, when the desert's heat relented, and any pursuit would have more difficulty tracking them. He helped Lily onto Takoda, her movements still pained and clumsy, but improving with each hour. Her body was beginning to recover from the ordeal, though the psychological scars would take much longer to heal. Before mounting behind her, Hakan performed a ritual he hadn't done in years. He stood facing the 4 directions, speaking softly in Apache, asking the spirits of his ancestors for guidance and protection. It felt strange after so long, like putting on clothes that no longer quite fit, but also right in a way he couldn't fully explain. What did you say? Lily asked as he swung up behind her. I asked my grandfather's spirit to watch over us, Hakan replied, guiding Takoda out of the canyon. He was a great warrior who fought the Mexican army and later the Americans. He taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, but moving forward despite it. I think we're going to need his wisdom before this is over. They rode through darkness, painted silver by a 3/4 moon, following paths that existed more in Hakan's memory than in any visible trail. The desert at night was a different world, alive with sounds and movements invisible during the day's crushing heat. Coyotes called to each other across vast distances, their songs rising and falling like conversations in a language older than human speech. Owls hunted on silent wings, and somewhere in the distance, a mountain lion's scream echoed off stone walls. Lily tensed at the sound, and Hakan felt her back press against his chest. That's far away, he assured her, and mountain lions avoid humans unless they're desperate or cornered. We're safe. Safe is relative when you're being hunted by a corrupt judge with unlimited resources, Lily murmured, but some of the tension left her shoulders. How long until we reach your mother's camp? 2 hours if we maintain this pace. The path gets rougher, though, once we enter the Red Canyon. You'll need to hold on tight. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic movement of the horse and the cool night air almost meditative. Then Lily spoke again, her voice thoughtful. Ayana believed people could learn to live together. That understanding could overcome prejudice. Do you still believe that after everything that's happened? Hakan took his time answering. I want to. There are good people in both worlds, people who see individuals rather than categories. But there are also people like Whitlock, who profit from division and fear. As long as men like him have power, Ayana's dream will be difficult to achieve, but not impossible, Lily pressed. You married her despite the barriers between your peoples. You built a life together. That proves it can be done. For a while, Hakan agreed. Until violence destroyed it. That's the pattern, isn't it? Every time a bridge is built between our worlds, someone comes along with a torch to burn it down. Then we build bridges faster than they can burn them, Lily said with sudden intensity. We make Ayana's dream impossible to kill by spreading it wider than one settlement, one family. We make it too big to destroy. Her optimism was almost painful to hear, so reminiscent of Ayana's idealism that Hakan felt the old grief stirring in his chest. But there was steel beneath Lily's hope, a determination forged in the desert sun and sharpened by her near-death experience. She wasn't naive. She simply refused to let cruelty and hatred have the final word. First we survive, Hakan said gently. Then we can think about building bridges. The Red Canyon announced itself with walls that seemed to glow even in moonlight. Iron-rich stone that had given the formation its name. The path narrowed here, forcing them to proceed single file between walls that rose 50 feet on either side. It was a vulnerable position, easy to ambush, but it was also the fastest route to the winter camp. Hakan kept Takoda moving at a steady walk, his ears straining for any sound that didn't belong. They were halfway through the canyon when Hakan heard it, the soft click of metal on stone, unmistakable to anyone who'd spent years surviving by paying attention to details. He reined Takoda to a stop, his body going absolutely still. What is it? Lily whispered. We're not alone. Hakan's hand moved to the rifle across his back. Someone's ahead of us, blocking the path. Whitlock's men? Okay, I don't know. Be ready to run if I give the word. Hakan urged Takoda forward cautiously, every sense alert. The canyon walls made fighting impossible. There was no room to maneuver, no cover to use. If this was an ambush, their only option was retreat. A figure stepped out from behind a boulder 30 yards ahead, silhouetted against the moonlit sky beyond the canyon's end. As Hakan's hand tightened on his rifle, the figure raised both hands in a gesture of peace and spoke in Apache. Hakan Blacktalon returns to his people after 8 winters of silence. The elders said you would never show your face again. It seems the elders were wrong. Hakan relaxed fractionally, recognizing the voice even if he couldn't quite make out the face in the darkness. Keme, you're a long way from the winter camp. The figure moved closer, resolving into a young Apache warrior, perhaps 25 years old, with the lean build of someone who lived hard and traveled light. Kem had been barely more than a boy when Hakan left, but he'd grown into his strength. I'm on patrol, Kim explained. We've had white men poking around the edges of our territory. Your mother sent scouts out to watch for trouble. His eyes moved to Lily, taking in her torn dress and obvious injuries. This looks like trouble. It's complicated, Hakan said carefully. I need to speak with my mother and the elders. This woman needs protection. A white woman. Kim's tone was neutral, but tension crackled beneath the surface. You know what Niol will say about bringing a white person into the camp. Niol can say what he likes, Hakan replied, his voice hardening. This woman is family. She's Ayana's half-sister. The name hung in the air between them, charged with memory and loss. Everyone in the clan had known Ayana, had mourned her death. Keme's expression shifted from suspicion to surprise to something that might have been understanding. "Ayana's sister," he repeated slowly. "Your mother will want to hear this. Follow me. I'll take you to the camp." He turned to lead the way, then paused and looked back at Hakan. "But Hakan, you should know. Niol's hatred for whites has only grown stronger since you left. He's convinced the only way our people will survive is complete separation. No contact, no compromise. Bringing a white woman into our camp, even Ayana's sister, he'll see it as a betrayal of everything we're trying to preserve." "Then we'll deal with Niol," Hakan said firmly. "Lead on." They emerged from the Red Canyon into a broad valley dotted with juniper and pinon pine. In the distance, perhaps a mile away, the warm glow of campfires marked the location of the winter camp. As they drew closer, Hakan felt emotions warring within him. Apprehension at facing the people he'd abandoned, grief at seeing how much smaller the camp had become, and a strange sense of homecoming that he hadn't expected. The camp consisted of a dozen wickiups arranged in a loose circle around a central fire pit. Horses were corralled at the valley's edge, and Hakan could see figures moving between the shelters, people going about the evening routines that hadn't changed in generations. As Kemi led them into the firelight, those routines stopped. People emerged from wickiups, conversations died mid-sentence, and all eyes turned to the newcomer who'd been absent for so long. An elderly woman separated herself from the group near the largest wickiup. She moved slowly, leaning on a walking stick, but there was nothing frail about the way she carried herself. Her grey hair hung in a single braid over one shoulder, and her face bore the deep lines of someone who'd survived 8 decades of joy and sorrow. When she saw Hakan, she stopped, one hand going to her chest as if to steady her heart. "My son," she said simply, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "You've come home." Hakan dismounted and moved toward her, years of separation falling away as he looked into his mother's face. "Mother, I'm sorry it took so long." She studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes seeing past the man to the boy she'd raised, the warrior she'd trained, the grieving husband who'd fled rather than face his pain. Then she nodded once, acceptance and forgiveness in that single gesture. "You're here now. That's what matters." Her gaze shifted to Lily, still mounted on Takoda. "And you've brought a guest." "She looks injured." "This is Lily Harrington," Hakan said, helping Lily down from the horse. She swayed, and he steadied her with a hand at her elbow. "She's Ayana's half-sister. She was left to die in the desert by the same man who ordered the raid on Silver Creek. I need your help to keep her safe." A ripple of reaction moved through the assembled people. Some moved closer, curiosity overcoming caution. Others stepped back, old wounds and newer fears, making them wary of any white presence in their camp. And one man, tall and gaunt, with a face like weathered stone, pushed through the crowd with fury written in every line of his body. "No!" Niol's voice cracked like a whip. "You disappear for 8 years, abandoning your responsibilities, and now you return bringing a white woman into our camp. Have you lost all sense of who you are, Hakan Blacktalon? Have you forgotten everything your people have suffered at the hands of hers?" Hakan met the elder's gaze steadily, refusing to be cowed. "I haven't forgotten anything, Niol. I remember every face of every person we've lost. I remember Silver Creek burning. I remember Ayana dying because men like you said love across the divide was a betrayal. And I remember you telling me I wasn't welcome here anymore. Then why have you returned?" Niol demanded. "To mock our traditions, to bring more white poison into our camp? And I've returned because this woman is family," Hakan replied, his voice rising to match Niol's intensity. "She's Ayana's blood sister. She carries the same loss we do, the same grief. And she's being hunted by the man responsible for killing our people. Will you turn away family in need because her skin is the wrong color? Is that what we've become?" The confrontation hung in the balance, the entire camp watching to see how their elder would respond. Then Hakan's mother stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. "Enough," she said quietly, but her voice carried absolute authority. "This woman is injured and exhausted. Whatever disagreements we have, we don't leave the wounded to suffer while we argue politics." She turned to address the camp. "Someone prepare a place for her to rest. And bring my medicine bag. Hakan, help her to my wickiup." It wasn't a request, and even Neol recognized the line that had been drawn. To challenge Hakan's mother now would be to challenge her position as the clan's primary healer and elder woman, a breach of protocol that even his anger couldn't justify. He glared at Hakan with eyes full of cold promise, then turned and stalked away into the darkness. As women moved to help Lily and the crowd began to disperse, Hakan's mother gripped his arm. "You've made a powerful enemy tonight," she said softly. "Neol will call for your banishment at tomorrow's council meeting. Be prepared to fight for your place here." "I'm prepared to do whatever's necessary," Hakan replied, watching as Lily was guided toward the warmth and shelter of his mother's wickiup. "She's worth fighting for." "They all are." His mother followed his gaze, then nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud of you. He always said courage was measured not by how fiercely you fought enemies, but by how passionately you protected those who couldn't protect themselves." She squeezed his arm. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we face the elders. And whatever they decide, know that I stand with you." As Hakan watched his mother disappear into the wickiup to tend to Lily, he felt the weight of what he'd set in motion. By bringing Lily here, he'd forced a confrontation that had been brewing for 8 years. Tomorrow, the council would decide whether he still had a place among his people. And whatever they decided, Whitlock was still out there, still hunting, still dangerous. But for tonight, Lily was safe. And that would have to be enough. Dawn broke cold and pale over the winter camp, painting the valley in shades of grey and gold that seemed to hesitate between night and day. Hakan had spent most of the darkness hours sitting by a small fire outside his mother's wickiup, alternating between watching the camp and checking on Lily's condition. His mother had treated her wounds with practiced efficiency, applying poultices of crushed herbs and wrapping the rope burns in clean cloth soaked in healing solutions passed down through generations. Lily had fallen into an exhausted sleep shortly after, her breathing finally settling into the deep rhythm of genuine rest rather than pain-induced unconsciousness. Now, as cooking fires began to kindle throughout the camp and people emerged to begin their morning routines, Hakan felt the weight of scrutiny pressing down on him. Eyes tracked his movements with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and in some cases outright hostility. He was no longer simply Hakan Black Talon, the warrior who had left 8 years ago. He was Hakan the outsider, the man who had abandoned his people and now returned with complications trailing behind him like shadows. Kem approached carrying 2 bowls of corn mush, steam rising from their surfaces in the cool morning air. He handed one to Hakan and sat down cross-legged beside the fire. "The council meets at midday," he said without preamble. "Neol has been talking to the other elders since before sunrise. He's building support for your banishment. What are they saying?" Hakan asked, though he could guess, "that you turned your back on the clan when we needed warriors most. That you chose the white man's world over your own people. That bringing a white woman here, even one connected to Ayana, shows you've forgotten who you are." Kemi paused, stirring his mush with a wooden spoon. "But there are others who remember how you fought for the clan before Ayana died. Your mother has been reminding them of these things." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of 3 women, all older, all carrying themselves with the quiet authority of those who had earned respect through years of service to the clan. The eldest, a woman named Halona, whose face bore the pockmarked scars of surviving smallpox, gestured toward the wickiup where Lily rested. "We come to meet Ayana's sister," Halona said in careful English. "Your mother was daughter of our hearts, raised among us before she went to live in the white man's world. We grieve her loss still." Hakan stood recognizing the significance of their visit. These were the elder women whose voices carried weight in clan decisions, particularly in matters of family and tradition. Their support could shift the balance of opinion before the council even convened. The flap of his mother's wickiup moved aside, and Lily emerged, blinking in the morning light. She had been dressed in traditional Apache clothing, a deerskin dress that hung loosely on her thin frame, and her blonde hair had been braided in the practical style Apache women wore for working. The transformation was startling, a visual bridge between worlds that seemed to embody everything Ayana had believed possible. Halona stepped forward and touched Lily's face gently. "You have her eyes, the same color of summer sky that made her different from birth." The elder woman's voice carried both warmth and deep sadness. "Come, we will tell you of your sister while there is time before the council meets." As the women led Lily away, Hakan watched them go with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The elder women's acceptance of Lily was encouraging, but Niall's opposition remained formidable. The gaunt elder had survived decades of conflict with white settlers and soldiers, had watched his people decimated by disease and war, and had concluded that complete separation was the only path to survival. Convincing him otherwise would be nearly impossible. The hours before midday passed slowly. Hakan spent them walking the perimeter of the camp, reacquainting himself with faces he'd known since childhood and meeting the children who had been born during his absence. Some people greeted him warmly, others with reserve, and a few turned away entirely, making their judgment clear without words. Shortly before the council was set to convene, his mother found him standing at the valley's edge, looking out over land that had been Apache territory for generations, but now existed only at the sufferance of white authorities who could revoke that permission at any moment. "You're thinking too hard," she observed, coming to stand beside him. "I can see the thoughts circling in your head like vultures." "I'm thinking about what I'll say to the elders," Hakan admitted. "How do I justify 8 years of absence? How do I explain that saving Lily was worth risking everything?" His mother was quiet for a moment, then spoke with measured wisdom. "Your wife believed in possibility, not certainty. She knew coexistence would be difficult, perhaps impossible in her lifetime. But she also knew that without people willing to try, there would be no hope at all." She placed a weathered hand on his arm. "The council will judge you today. Whatever they decide, remember this: your worth isn't determined by their verdict, but by your actions. You saved a life. You honored family. These are the marks of a man." The council convened in a large clearing at the heart of the camp, with the 7 elders seated in a semicircle facing the assembled clan members. Niall sat in the center position, his gaunt face set in lines of grim determination. To his right was Hakon's mother, the only woman among the elders, her expression carefully neutral. The other 5 elders were men in their 60s and 70s, survivors of wars and diseases that had decimated their people. Hakan stood before them, Kemi at his side as his designated supporter. Lily watched from among the elder women, her pale face stark against the darker skin of those surrounding her. The entire clan had gathered, perhaps 30 people in total, a fraction of what the group had been in Hakan's youth. Niall rose to speak, his voice carrying across the silent assembly. "We gathered to address the return of Hakan Blacktalan. 8 years ago, this man left our camp claiming grief as his reason. We understood grief, but when we told him the clan needed him, he ignored our pleas. He chose his personal pain over his responsibilities to the people who raised him." The elders' words were measured and factual, laying out a case with prosecutorial precision. For 8 years, Hakan Blacktalan lived as a hermit, avoiding all contact with his people. While we struggled, he hoarded his skills. While we needed warriors, he hid in the canyons. And now he returns, not because he has missed his people, but because he needs something from us. He brings a white woman and demands we protect her, risk our safety for her. Niall's eyes fixed on Hakan with cold judgment. "I propose that Hakan Blacktalan be formally banished from this clan, that his name be struck from our records, his ties to us severed completely." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Before Hakan could respond, his mother stood, her movement drawing all eyes. "Niall speaks harsh truths," she began, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. My son did abandon us 8 years ago. These facts cannot be denied." She paused, letting her acknowledgement settle. But Niall speaks only partial truths, and partial truths are often more dangerous than lies. She turned to address the full assembly. "My son left because he was broken by grief in ways none of us fully understood. For 8 years, he has lived with that loss. And yes, he should have been stronger. But 2 days ago, he found a woman left to die by the same white judge who ordered the massacre at Silver Creek. He could have walked away, but he didn't. He cut her free, knowing it would bring trouble. And when he discovered this woman was Ayana's sister, he brought her here because he understood that family is sacred." She paused, her dark eyes sweeping across the assembled clan. "You want to banish him for bringing a white woman? Then you must banish me too, for I have welcomed her. You must banish the elder women who have claimed her as Ayana's sister. You must banish everyone who believes that our humanity is measured not by the color of skin we reject, but by the compassion we show." The challenge was direct and impossible to ignore. To banish Hakan now would require splitting the entire clan. Before Niall could respond, another elder, an ancient man named Takala, rose slowly to his feet. "I remember when the white soldiers came to our lands," Takala said, his voice thin but steady. "We fought for years. We won many battles. But we lost the war because there were too many of them and too few of us." He looked around at the small gathering. "This is all that remains. 30 souls where once there were hundreds. We have survived by being careful, by adapting to new realities." He turned his gaze on Hakan. "You left us when we needed you. That is a wound that has not healed. But you have returned, and you have brought us a choice. Do we close ourselves off completely? Or do we remember that our people have always adapted?" He sat back down slowly. "I propose we do not rush to judgment. Let Hakan and this white woman remain for one full moon. Let us see through their actions whether they are worthy." The suggestion broke the building tension, offering a middle path. Other elders began to murmur, some nodding thoughtfully. Even Niall seemed to recognize that pressing for immediate banishment now would fail. "A trial period," another elder mused. "That has precedent." She looked at Hakan. "But there must be conditions. Tasks that prove commitment," or Niall seized on this. "Very well. I propose conditions. First, Hakan must provide for the clan as he would have done these past 8 years. Second, the white woman must prove she respects our ways by learning our language and customs. And third, Hakan must tell us everything about this judge who hunts her. Because if white soldiers come here, it endangers all of us." Before Hakan could speak, Lily stepped forward from her place among the women. "May I speak?" she asked, her voice clear despite obvious nervousness. Hakan's mother nodded. "She is involved in this judgment. She should be heard." Lily moved to stand beside Hakan. "Honored elders, I understand your hesitation to trust me. My people have done terrible things to yours. Judge Whitlock is responsible for the deaths of many innocents. He profits from keeping our peoples divided." She paused. "My sister Ayana believed that understanding between our peoples was possible. I never knew her, but I want to honor her memory by proving she was right. I will learn your language and customs because I genuinely want to understand, and I will help Hakan bring Whitlock to justice." The simple honesty of her words seemed to reach something in the assembled clan. Even some who had been hostile began to soften. Niall stood again. "The council will deliberate. Hakan Blacktalon and Lily Harrington will wait outside the circle." The elders deliberated for what felt like hours. Finally, Niall stood and gestured for Hakan and Lily to return. "The council has decided," Niall announced. "Hakan Blacktalon will be allowed to remain for one full moon, during which time he will provide for the clan. Lily Harrington will be granted protection during this period while she learns our ways. At the end of the moon, we will meet again to determine whether permanent acceptance is warranted." He paused. "But if white soldiers come here because of her, if our camp is endangered, the trial period ends immediately, and both of you will be cast out. The safety of the clan comes first always. It was not full acceptance, but it was not banishment either. They had bought time, 1 month to prove themselves, to deal with Whitlock, to find a way forward. As the council dispersed, Hakon's mother approached. "You did well. Both of you. Now comes the harder part, actually proving you deserve to stay." "I'll start hunting tomorrow," Hakon said. "The clan needs meat." "Good. And Lily will stay with me, learning what Ayana learned." His mother paused. "But you must also deal with Whitlock. As long as he hunts her, none of us are safe. A wounded predator is more dangerous than a healthy one." "I know," Hakon replied grimly. "I've been thinking about that. Fighting him directly would be suicide. But there might be another way, information. If we could get that ledger Lily saw, or find other proof of his crimes, we might be able to turn his own weapon against him." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. His mother nodded slowly. "A dangerous plan. It means going into his territory." "Yes, but staying here waiting for him to come to us puts the entire clan at risk. Better to take the fight to him." He looked toward where Lily was being led away by the women. "She's been through enough. The rest of this fight is mine to finish." "Don't be foolish," his mother chided. "This fight belongs to both of you. You don't have to carry burdens alone anymore. That's what coming home means." Her words challenged the isolation that had become Hakon's default response. For 8 years, he had handled everything alone. But alone, he was just one man against a powerful enemy. "Then we plan together," Hakon said, accepting the wisdom. "Tomorrow, after I've brought meat for the clan, Lily and I will figure out how to bring Whitlock down." As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Hakon felt something he hadn't experienced in 8 long years. Not quite hope, but possibility. The sense that perhaps the story didn't have to end in tragedy. 1 month to prove himself. 1 month to protect Lily. 1 month to stop Whitlock. It would have to be enough. 3 days had passed since the council's judgment, and Hakon had thrown himself into proving his worth to the clan with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Each dawn found him in the high valleys tracking elk. Each afternoon saw him returning with meat that fed families who had grown accustomed to scarcity. And each evening he spent repairing weapons, mending shelters, doing the work of 2 men to make up for 8 years of absence. The physical labor was exhausting, but it served a purpose beyond simply fulfilling the council's conditions. It kept his mind occupied, kept the growing sense of urgency about Whitlock at bay. At least during daylight hours, Lily had integrated into the camp's rhythms with surprising ease, spending her mornings with Hakon's mother, learning the Apache language, and afternoons helping the women with cooking, hide preparation, and the countless tasks that kept a community functioning. Her hands, soft from years of teaching in Boston schoolrooms, had developed calluses and small cuts from working with leather and stone tools. But she never complained, approaching each lesson with the same fierce determination she had shown when facing the council. The elder women had begun calling her Little Sky Eyes, a name that acknowledged both her unusual appearance and her growing place within their circle. On the 4th morning, as Hakon prepared to leave for another hunt, Lily intercepted him at the edge of camp. She wore the deerskin dress that had become her daily clothing, and her blonde hair was braided with strips of colored cloth in the Apache style. In the pale dawn light, she looked like a figure caught between 2 worlds, fully belonging to neither but creating something new in the space between. "We need to talk," she said, without preamble, her voice low enough that nearby early risers wouldn't overhear. "About Whitlock. About what happens when this month is over and we still haven't dealt with him." Hakon glanced around to ensure they had relative privacy, then nodded toward a path that led away from the main camp. They walked in silence until they reached a rocky outcropping that provided both a view of the surrounding territory and enough distance that their conversation wouldn't be overheard. "You've been avoiding this discussion," Lily observed, settling onto a flat stone and gesturing for Hakon to join her. "Every time I try to bring up Whitlock or what we're going to do about him, You change the subject or suddenly remember some urgent task for the clan. I haven't been avoiding it, Hakan protested, though even as he spoke he recognized the lie. I've been fulfilling my obligations to the council. You've been burying yourself in work, so you don't have to think about the fact that Whitlock is still out there. Still dangerous and still hunting me, Lily corrected, her pale eyes holding his with uncomfortable directness. I understand why. You've lost so much already. The idea of risking everything again, of potentially leading danger back to your people, terrifies you. Her words cut through his defenses with surgical precision. Hakan looked away, studying the horizon, where the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. You're right, he admitted quietly. After Ayana died, after Silver Creek burned, I swore I would never again be responsible for bringing destruction to people I cared about. By cutting you free, by bringing you here, I've broken that promise to myself. If Whitlock's men find this camp, if people die because of my decision to help you, I don't know if I could survive that guilt. Lily was silent for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried a gentleness that somehow made her words more impactful. Hakan, you can't control everything. You couldn't control the raiders who attacked Silver Creek. You can't control Whitlock's determination to silence me. What you can control is whether you face these threats or run from them. And right now, by avoiding this conversation, you're running. The accusation stung precisely because it was accurate. For 8 years, running had been Hakan's response to pain, to fear, to anything that threatened to break through the walls he'd built around his heart. But running hadn't made him whole. It had simply made him alone. So what do you propose? He asked, turning back to face her. We can't fight Whitlock directly. He has 20 armed men, the authority of territorial law and resources we can't match. Even if we somehow managed to kill him, his death would bring down federal investigators, army patrols, and consequences that would destroy this clan. I'm not proposing we kill him, Lily replied. I'm proposing we destroy him the same way he's destroyed so many others, with evidence and exposure. You said yourself that the ledger I saw in his office contained records of 43 murders. If we could get that ledger, or even credible copies of its contents, we could take it to authorities in Santa Fe who aren't under Whitlock's control. The territorial governor is one of Whitlock's allies, Hakan pointed out. So are most of the judges in this region. Who exactly do you think would act on this evidence? Lily had clearly been thinking about this because her answer came without hesitation. Federal marshals. The United States government has been trying to bring order to the territories, and they don't appreciate local officials who operate like independent warlords. If we could get evidence to the right people, people who see Whitlock as a threat to federal authority rather than an asset, they would act. That's a lot of assumptions, Hakan said, though he could feel his resistance weakening. Assuming the ledger still exists, assuming we could steal it without getting caught or killed, assuming we could get it to Santa Fe, assuming federal authorities would care enough to intervene. Yes, it's all assumptions, Lily agreed. But what's the alternative? We hide here for a month, then what? Even if the council accepts us permanently, Whitlock will still be hunting me. He can't afford to let me live, not when I know what I know. Eventually, he'll find this camp or force me to leave to protect your people. Either way, he wins. Hakan knew she was right, had known it since the moment he cut her free from those stakes in the desert. This confrontation with Whitlock had been inevitable from that first act of defiance. The only question was whether they would face it on their terms or wait for Whitlock to choose the time and place. Tell me everything you remember about Whitlock's office, Hakan said, making his decision. The layout, the security, where the ledger was kept. If we're going to do this, we need to plan it perfectly. Relief and determination flashed across Lily's face as she realized he was committing to action rather than continued avoidance. She closed her eyes, clearly visualizing the space she had seen only briefly before being discovered. Whitlock's office is on the 2nd floor of the Territorial Administration building in Redemption. It's the largest room, corner position, with windows overlooking the main street and the side alley. There's only one door, which opens onto a hallway that leads to stairs at either end of the building. Guards? Hakan asked. Not inside the building at night, from what I observed during my time in Redemption. Whitlock is arrogant enough to believe his reputation keeps people from crossing him. But there are usually 2 men stationed outside the building's main entrance and patrol circuits through town every few hours. Lily opened her eyes. The ledger was in his desk center drawer. It's bound in black leather with his initials embossed in gold on the cover. Distinctive enough that there's no mistaking it. Windows large enough for entry. Hakan pressed, his mind already working through possible approaches. The one overlooking the alley might be. It's about 12 feet off the ground, which would require a rope or climbing, but the alley is narrow and usually empty after dark. Lily paused. But Hakan, even if we get the ledger, how do we get it to Santa Fe? That's a 4-day ride through territory Whitlock controls. He'll have men watching all the roads. We don't use the roads, Hakan replied, a plan beginning to form. There are paths through the mountains that only Apache know, routes that cut the journey to 2 days for someone who knows how to navigate them. Whitlock's men wouldn't be able to follow, and by the time they realized we weren't using standard routes, we'd already be in Santa Fe. We, Lily repeated, emphasis on the plural. You're planning to come with me? You can't make that journey alone, Hakan said firmly. The mountain paths are dangerous even for experienced travelers, and you've barely recovered from your ordeal in the desert. Besides, if something goes wrong, if Whitlock's men somehow catch up to us, you'll need someone who can fight. What about the clan? Lily challenged. What about your month of proving yourself? If you leave now, Neol will use it as evidence that you're unreliable, that you abandon your people whenever something more pressing comes along. The objection struck at Hakan's deepest fear, that he would be seen as repeating the pattern of 8 years ago, choosing personal concerns over communal responsibility. But there was a crucial difference this time. 8 years ago he had run from pain. Now he would be running toward danger, not for himself, but to protect both Lily and the clan from the threat Whitlock represented. I'll talk to my mother and Keme, Hakan decided. Explain what we're planning and why it can't wait. If they understand that this is about protecting the clan rather than abandoning it, maybe the council will see it the same way. They spent the next hour refining their plan, working through contingencies and timing. They would need to strike soon, within the next few days, before Whitlock could organize a more thorough search for Lily. The journey to Redemption would take most of a day, which meant they would need to approach the town after dark, execute the theft and be away before dawn. Speed and stealth would be essential, as would detailed knowledge of Redemption's layout and guard patterns. I know someone who might help, Lily said as they prepared to return to camp. Before Whitlock condemned me, I had students in Redemption, children whose families opposed his control but were too afraid to speak publicly. One of those families, the Brennans, lost their father to what Whitlock called an Apache raid, but what was almost certainly murder. The mother, Martha Brennan, she would help us if she could. Can we trust her? Hakan asked. She risked everything to tell me her suspicions about her husband's death, knowing Whitlock had eyes and ears everywhere in town. That took courage. And she knows the guard schedules, who can be bribed, who's loyal to Whitlock out of fear versus conviction. Lily met his eyes. We'll need local knowledge to make this work. Martha can provide that. They returned to camp to find it bustling with unusual activity. A hunting party had returned with news that a group of white men had been spotted 10 miles to the south, moving parallel to the reservation boundaries with what appeared to be surveying equipment. The sighting had triggered alarm throughout the camp, raising fears that the territorial government was preparing to seize more Apache land, or that Whitlock's men had expanded their search pattern. Neol had called an emergency gathering of the warriors, such as they were. The clan's fighting strength consisted of perhaps 8 men of various ages, a pitiful number compared to the scores of warriors who had once defended this territory. Hakan joined the circle as Neol outlined what they knew. The surveyors were accompanied by 6 armed men, Niol reported, his gaunt face grave. They made no move toward our camp, but their presence this close suggests either official territorial business or private interests scouting our land. Either way, it represents a threat we must monitor, Keme spoke up. Could they be Whitlock's men, searching for the woman Hakan brought? Possible, Niol conceded, his cold gaze sliding toward Hakan, which brings us back to the question of whether harboring her puts us all at risk. If Whitlock is willing to send armed parties into Apache territory, he's more dangerous than we estimated. Or more desperate, Hakan countered. A man at peace with his actions doesn't send search parties. He's afraid of what Lily knows, which means that knowledge has power. Power we could use against him. We are not warriors anymore, another elder, Chaitin, said tiredly. We are survivors, trying to preserve what little remains of our people. Getting involved in white man's conflicts, even conflicts with men who have harmed us, risks everything we've managed to protect. The defeatism in Chaitin's words reflected a harsh reality. The Apache had fought for generations and lost. The survivors had made peace with diminished circumstances, trading freedom for mere survival. To ask them now to take action that might provoke retaliation required overcoming not just fear, but the learned helplessness of a people who had been systematically crushed. Hakan's mother, who had been listening silently from her position among the elder women, now spoke. My son has something to say. I suggest we listen before making decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. All eyes turned to Hakan. He felt the weight of their attention, the mixture of hope and skepticism, the desperate desire for someone to offer a path forward that didn't require choosing between dignity and survival. Taking a breath, he began to speak. Lily and I are planning to leave for redemption tomorrow night, he said, deciding that honesty was the only path forward. We're going to steal evidence from Whitlock's office, proof of his crimes that we can take to federal authorities in Santa Fe. If we succeed, Whitlock will be arrested and his network of corruption dismantled. If we fail, we'll likely be killed, but the danger to this camp will die with us. Shocked silence greeted this announcement. Then Niol erupted. You plan to abandon us again? In the middle of your trial period, when you're supposed to be proving your commitment. I'm not abandoning anyone, Hakan replied, keeping his voice level. I'm trying to eliminate the threat that endangers all of us. As long as Whitlock is free, he'll keep searching for Lily. Eventually his men will find this camp, and when they do, what will we do? Fight 6 armed white men with our 8 warriors? Run and abandon the only home we have left? Or worse, hand Lily over to be murdered and live with the shame of that cowardice? The harsh questions hung in the air, forcing the assembled clan to confront realities they had been avoiding. Murmurs rippled through the gathering, some angry, some thoughtful. What Hakan proposes is dangerous, Takala, the ancient elder, said slowly. But doing nothing is also dangerous. Sometimes the path between bad options and worse options is very narrow indeed. He looked at Niol. If Hakan and the white woman leave to face this threat, they do so as individuals, not as representatives of the clan. If they succeed, we benefit. If they fail, we can truthfully say we had no part in it. It was a politician's answer, offering deniability while tacitly approving the mission. Niol clearly recognized the compromise for what it was. A way for the council to avoid making a definitive decision while still allowing Hakan to act. Fine, Niol said coldly. But understand this, Hakan Blacktalon. If you leave tomorrow, your trial period ends. When and if you return, the council will judge whether your actions warrant permanent acceptance or banishment. You'll be gambling everything on this foolish mission. I understand, Hakan replied. And I accept those terms. The gathering dispersed shortly after, with small groups forming to discuss this new development in hushed, urgent tones. Lily found Hakan standing alone near the horse corral, staring out at the darkening valley. You didn't have to tell them, she said quietly. We could have just left. Yes, I did, Hakan replied. 8 years ago I left without explaining, without giving them a choice in the matter. I won't make that mistake again, Whatever happens now, at least they know the truth. Lily nodded, understanding the distinction he was making between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. So we leave tomorrow night. That gives us one day to prepare, to make sure we have everything we need, and to say goodbye, Hakan added softly, in case we don't come back. They spent the next day in careful preparation. Hakan gathered supplies for the journey, including rope, dark clothing suitable for night work, weapons, and enough dried food for a week. Lily spent time with the elder women, learning phrases in Apache that she might need and listening to stories about Ayana that filled in more pieces of the sister she had never known. There was a bittersweet quality to these preparations, the knowledge that they might be the last peaceful hours either of them would experience. As sunset approached, Hakan's mother called him to her wickiup. Inside, she had prepared a ceremonial meal. Nothing elaborate, just corn cakes and herbal tea. But the ritual of sharing food before a dangerous journey carried deep significance in Apache tradition. Your father went on many dangerous journeys, she said as they ate. Each time I prepared this meal for him. Each time he returned safely. Until the last time, when he didn't. Her eyes held ancient pain, but also acceptance. You cannot predict which journey will be your last. You can only make sure that each one is undertaken for reasons worthy of the risk. Stopping Whitlock, protecting Lily, that's worthy, Hakan said. Though it came out as half question, half statement. Yes, his mother confirmed. Your father would approve. So does Ayana's spirit wherever it rests. So do I. She reached across the small space between them and gripped his hand. Come back to us, my son. Come back and finish what you started, building a life instead of hiding from one. As full darkness fell and the camp settled into night routines, Hakan and Lily made their final preparations. They would leave on foot rather than horseback, moving faster and more quietly through terrain where horses would struggle. The journey to redemption would be grueling, but both had proven capable of enduring hardship. Keme found them as they prepared to depart, pressing a small leather pouch into Hakan's hand. Emergency supplies, he explained. Herbs for pain, for infection, for staying awake when you need to. My mother was a healer. She taught me these things before the fever took her. His expression was serious. Bring back evidence that will end Whitlock's threat. But more than that, bring yourselves back. The clan needs warriors, but it needs hope more. You two represent hope. With those words echoing in their minds, Hakan and Lily slipped out of camp under cover of darkness, leaving behind the fragile safety of the winter camp for the dangerous uncertainties that lay ahead. The moon was only a sliver in the sky, providing just enough light to navigate by without making them visible to distant observers. They moved in silence, conserving energy for the long night ahead. Redemption awaited, as did Judge Cornelius Whitlock, and the evidence that might finally bring justice for Ayana, for Silver Creek, for all those whose names filled that black leather ledger. The path forward was dangerous, possibly fatal, but it was a path chosen rather than fled from. And in that choice lay the difference between the man Hakan had been and the man he was determined to become. Useish. The outskirts of redemption appeared like a cluster of dim lights against the black canvas of night. Oil lamps and lanterns creating small islands of illumination in the vast darkness of the territorial frontier. Hakan and Lily crouched in the shadows of a rocky outcropping half a mile from town, studying the settlement's layout and watching for patterns in the guard rotations. They had traveled for 16 hours straight, stopping only twice for water and brief rest, pushing their bodies to the edge of exhaustion to reach redemption under cover of darkness. The town was larger than Hakan remembered from his few previous visits. Perhaps 200 buildings now, instead of the 100 or so that had existed when Ayana was still alive. Growth meant prosperity, and prosperity under Whitlock's rule meant more people under his control, more resources to exploit, more power concentrated in hands that had already proven willing to commit murder to maintain dominance. The Brennan house is on the eastern edge, Lily whispered, pointing toward a modest structure set apart from the main cluster of buildings. Martha lives there with her 2 children. If we can reach her without being seen, she can tell us about current guard patterns and whether anything has changed since I was condemned." Hakan studied the approaches to the Brennan house, noting sight lines and potential cover. "We'll circle wide, come in from the north where there are no other buildings. Stay low, move during the gaps between patrol passes, and if anyone sees us, we run back to the Badlands and abort the mission." They waited until a pair of guards completed their circuit through the eastern section of town, then moved swiftly across open ground to the shelter of a storage shed behind the Brennan property. From there, it was a short dash to the back door of the house itself. Lily knocked softly, 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones, apparently a signal she and Martha had arranged during her teaching days. The door opened a crack, revealing a woman's face lined with worry and premature aging. Martha Brennan was perhaps 35, but looked 50, her brown hair streaked with grey, and her eyes carrying the haunted quality of someone who had seen too much loss. Recognition flashed across her features when she saw Lily, followed immediately by shock. "You're alive," Martha breathed, pulling them quickly inside and shutting the door. "They said you died in the desert. Whitlock announced it 3 days ago, said the sun and exposure had taken you as proof of your guilt." Her eyes moved to Hakan, taking in his Apache features with only brief hesitation. "Who's this?" "A friend," Lily replied simply. "Someone who saved my life and is helping me finish what I started. Martha, we need information about Whitlock's office, guard schedules, anything that's changed in the past week." Martha gestured them deeper into the house, away from windows where their silhouettes might be visible. 2 children, a boy of perhaps 10 and a girl of 7, slept in a small bedroom off the main room, unaware of the dangerous visitors their mother was harboring. The modest dwelling spoke of reduced circumstances, the aftermath of losing a husband and primary breadwinner. "Whitlock's increased security since your escape," Martha reported in a low voice. "There are now 4 guards on night rotation instead of 2, and they're checking the administration building every hour instead of every 3 hours. He's also posted a permanent guard inside the building, on the first floor near the stairs." Hakan and Lily exchanged glances. The increased security complicated their plans significantly. Getting past exterior guards was one thing, dealing with someone stationed inside the building was far more dangerous. "What about the guard inside?" Hakan asked. "Is it always the same person? Does he patrol or stay stationary?" "Usually, it's a man named Dutch Carver," Martha replied. "He's one of Whitlock's most loyal men, been with him since before he became a judge. Dutch sits at a desk at the base of the main staircase with a clear view of both the front entrance and the hallway. He's armed with a rifle and a pistol, and he doesn't drink on duty or fall asleep like some of the others." The information painted a grim picture. Getting past Dutch without raising an alarm would require either perfect stealth or some kind of distraction, and either option carried substantial risk. "Is there any other way into the building?" Lily pressed. "Service entrances, basement access, anything that wouldn't require going past the main stairs?" Martha thought for a moment. "There's a coal chute on the north side that leads to the basement. It's narrow, barely wide enough for a person, and it opens into the storage area below ground. From there, you'd have to find a way up to the 2nd floor without being heard, but at least you wouldn't have to go past Dutch." Hakan filed away this information, already revising their approach. The coal chute represented risk, but also opportunity, a way to enter the building unseen if they could manage the physical challenge of the narrow passage and the subsequent navigation through an unfamiliar interior. "We'll need a distraction," Lily said, voicing what Hakan was thinking. "Something to draw attention away from the administration building long enough for us to get in and out." "I can help with that," Martha offered, though fear was evident in her voice. "There's a storage barn on the western edge of town where Whitlock keeps confiscated property, things he's seized from people he's accused of crimes or debts. If that barn were to catch fire, it would draw every available man to fight it, including the guards from the administration building." "That would put you at risk," Hakan observed. "If anyone suspected you were involved in arson, Whitlock would have you arrested or worse." "My husband is dead because of that man," Martha replied with quiet intensity. "My children are growing up without a father because Whitlock wanted our water rights and saw murder as the simplest way to get them. If I can help bring him down, the risk is worth it." She looked at Lily. "You were kind to my children when you taught them. You treated them like they mattered, like their father's death hadn't made them invisible. Let me repay that kindness." The simple humanity in her words struck Hakan forcefully. This was what Whitlock's corruption had created, a town full of people living in fear, nursing private griefs, waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to challenge the judge's authority. Martha Brennan was choosing to be that person, not for glory or revenge, but for the simple desire to see justice done. They spent the next hour refining their plan. Martha would set the fire at precisely midnight, giving herself enough time to establish an alibi by being seen at the town's small church for a late prayer session beforehand. The fire would draw guards away from the administration building, giving Hakan and Lily perhaps 15 to 20 minutes to enter through the coal chute, reach Whitlock's office, retrieve the ledger, and escape before the alarm was raised and guards returned to their posts. "What about Dutch?" Lily asked. "Even with a fire drawing attention, he might not leave his post." "Dutch has a weakness," Martha said with a slight smile. "He's terrified of being trapped in burning buildings. Lost a brother in a hotel fire back in Kansas. If he hears there's a major fire close by, his instinct will be to get outside where he can see the escape routes. It's irrational, but fear usually is." As midnight approached, they prepared to move into position. Martha left first, heading toward the church with a shawl over her head and a prayer book tucked under her arm, playing the role of a pious widow seeking solace in religion. Hakan and Lily waited 10 minutes, then slipped out the back door and began their careful approach to the administration building. The coal chute was exactly where Martha had described, a narrow metal slide on the north side of the building, hidden behind a stack of empty crates. Hakan tested it carefully, noting the tight clearance and the steep angle of descent. It would be an uncomfortable squeeze, and once committed, there would be no easy way to reverse course. "I'll go first," Hakan decided. "If there's a problem below, I can deal with it before you're committed." He removed his rifle and handed it to Lily along with his knife. "These won't fit through the chute. You'll have to lower them separately once I'm down." The descent was claustrophobic and louder than he'd hoped, the metal chute amplifying every scrape and rustle as he forced his body through the tight passage. For several anxious seconds, he thought he might become stuck, his shoulders wedging against the sides. Then gravity and determination combined to pull him through, and he tumbled out into the darkness of the basement with less grace than he'd intended. He landed hard on a pile of coal, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Hakan lay still for a moment, listening for any indication that the noise had alerted Dutch upstairs. Silence, broken only by his own breathing and the distant sounds of the town outside. Moving carefully, he cleared a space beneath the chute and whispered up for Lily to send down the weapons. The rifle came first, wrapped in cloth to muffle sound, followed by the knife. Then Lily herself descended, her smaller frame navigating the tight passage more easily than Hakan's had. She emerged covered in coal dust, her blonde hair turned temporarily dark, her face smudged with black. "Charming look," Hakan murmured, with the ghost of a smile. "Fashion has never been my priority," Lily whispered back. "Which way to the stairs?" They moved through the basement by feel more than sight, Hakon's hands outstretched to avoid colliding with the various supplies and equipment stored in the underground space. After what felt like an eternity but was probably less than 2 minutes, they found a narrow staircase leading upward. A thin line of light showed beneath the door at the top, indicating the first-floor hallway beyond. Hakon pressed his ear to the door, listening intently. The sound of chair legs scraping on wood reached him, along with the rustle of newspaper pages and a man's occasional cough. Dutch was close, probably no more than 20 feet away at his station near the main stairs. Getting past him to reach the second floor would require perfect timing and absolute silence. Then, drifting through the night air, came the sound they'd been waiting for, shouts of alarm and the ringing of the town's fire bell. The storage barn was burning, and every able body in Redemption would be mobilized to fight it before the flames could spread to other structures. Through the door, they heard Dutch swear and push his chair back. Footsteps moved toward the building's front entrance, then paused. Hakon could imagine the man's internal struggle. Duty warring with fear, the compulsion to stay at his post, fighting against the visceral terror of being trapped inside while fire raged nearby. Fear won, as Martha had predicted. The footsteps resumed, moving rapidly toward the exit. And then the slam of the front door indicated Dutch had left his post. "Now," Hakon breathed, easing the basement door open. They emerged into a hallway lit by a single oil lamp, its flickering light creating dancing shadows on the walls. The building was eerily quiet now that Dutch had departed, the usual nighttime sounds of the town muffled by thick adobe walls. They moved to the main staircase and began climbing, every creak of the wooden steps sounding impossibly loud in the silence. The second-floor hallway stretched before them, doors on either side leading to various offices and storage rooms. Whitlock's office was at the far end, the corner position with windows overlooking both the main street and the side alley. As they approached, Hakon noted that the door was closed, but testing it carefully, not locked. The judge's arrogance extended to believing his reputation was security enough. Inside, the office was spacious and well-appointed, far more luxurious than one would expect in a frontier town. A large desk dominated the center of the room, flanked by filing cabinets and bookshelves. Oil paintings hung on the walls, depicting pastoral scenes that seemed grotesquely out of place given the violence and corruption their owner represented. The whole room reeked of pretension and stolen wealth. Lily moved immediately to the desk, trying the center drawer. It was locked, a small but significant obstacle. Hakon pulled out his knife, preparing to force the lock, when Lily stopped him with a gesture. She produced a hairpin from her braid and went to work on the mechanism with surprising skill. "My father taught me," she whispered at Hakon's questioning look. "He said a woman traveling alone should know how to get through locked doors in case of emergency." The lock clicked open. Never imagined the emergency would be burglary. The drawer contained several items: correspondence, a small pistol, a leather pouch of gold coins, and there, exactly as Lily had described it, a black leather ledger with Whitlock's initials embossed in gold on the cover. Hakon lifted it out carefully, opening it to confirm the contents. Page after page of names, dates, amounts paid, and brief notations about how each target had been eliminated. The methodical documentation of 43 murders, laid out with the dispassionate precision of an accountant recording business transactions. Jacob Thornton, 500 as riding accident. March 1885, Sarah Chen, 300, disappeared, presumed Apache raid. July 1886. On and on, a catalogue of lives destroyed for profit. And there, near the beginning of the ledger, an entry that made Hakon's hands tremble with rage. Thomas Harrington's trading post, Will 200, fired during Apache raid, June 1872. The massacre at Silver Creek, the death of Ayana, reduced to a single line in a murderer's account book. "We have it," Lily whispered urgently, seeing the ledger in his hands. "Now we need to leave before someone returns." Hakon was about to agree when the sound of footsteps on the stairs froze them both. Heavy boots moving quickly, followed by Dutch's distinctive gravelly voice calling out, "Judge Whitlock? Sir, there's a fire at the storage barn, but something don't feel right about it. I'm checking the building to make sure nobody's using it as a distraction." They were trapped, Hakan realized with cold clarity. Dutch was between them and the only staircase, and the office windows were too high above ground to jump without serious injury. Within seconds, the guard would reach the second floor and begin checking rooms. Discovery was inevitable unless they could find another way out or somehow neutralize Dutch without raising a broader alarm. Hakan made a split-second decision. He pressed the ledger into Lily's hands and whispered rapidly, "Window to the alley. Use the rope I brought to lower yourself to the ground. Take the ledger and run for the Badlands. Don't wait for me, don't look back, just run. What about you?" Lily hissed, her eyes wide with fear and understanding. "I'll slow Dutch down," Hakan replied, drawing his knife. "Give you time to get away. If I can escape after, I'll meet you at the rock formation 2 miles north of town. If I don't make it, get the ledger to Santa Fe. Finish what we started." Lily looked like she wanted to argue, but Dutch's footsteps were already in the hallway, methodically checking rooms as he approached. There was no time for debate. She moved to the window facing the alley, working quickly to open it and secure the rope to the heavy desk. Hakan positioned himself beside the door, pressed flat against the wall, where he would be invisible to anyone entering. The office door swung open, and Dutch stepped inside, his rifle held ready. His eyes went immediately to the open window, to the rope disappearing over the sill, and his face darkened with understanding. He moved toward the window, preparing to call out the alarm, which was exactly what Hakan had been waiting for. Hakan struck from behind, his arm locking around Dutch's throat in a chokehold designed to cut off blood flow to the brain without crushing the windpipe. The guard struggled violently, trying to bring his rifle to bear, but Hakan maintained pressure until Dutch's movements grew sluggish and then stopped altogether. The man slumped unconscious, and Hakan lowered him carefully to the floor. He had perhaps 5 minutes before Dutch regained consciousness, maybe less. Hakan moved to the window and looked down into the alley. Lily was already on the ground, the ledger clutched to her chest, looking up at him with anguished indecision. He made a sharp gesture, "Go now," and after a moment's hesitation, she turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows. Hakan knew he should follow, should climb down the rope and flee while he still had the chance. But something kept him in the office, staring down at Dutch's unconscious form. This man was one of Whitlock's most loyal enforcers, had probably participated in some of the murders documented in that ledger. And now he was vulnerable, defenseless at Hakan's mercy. The knife was in Hakan's hand, and it would be so easy. One quick slash across the throat, and Dutch would never wake up, never raise the alarm, never hunt them again. Justice, or perhaps revenge, delivered with cold efficiency. Ayana's death demanded payment, and here was an opportunity to extract it. But as Hakan stood over the unconscious man, he heard Ayana's voice in his memory, gentle but firm. "Violence answered with violence only creates more violence. If we're going to build bridges between our peoples, we have to start by seeing enemies as human beings who've made terrible choices, not as monsters beyond redemption." With a sound that was half growl, half sob, Hakan sheathed his knife. He wouldn't kill Dutch, wouldn't become the savage these people claimed his race to be. Instead, he would escape with the evidence that would bring Whitlock and his network down, through law and justice, rather than vigilante murder. It was a harder path, but it was the one Ayana would have chosen. Hakan climbed through the window and descended the rope rapidly, his muscles burning with the effort. He hit the ground and ran, heading not for the Badlands where Lily would be waiting, but toward the Brennan house on the eastern edge of town. He had to warn Martha, had to make sure she and her children weren't implicated in what they'd done. The fire at the storage barn was still burning, though the bucket brigade had it mostly contained. Most of Redemption's population was gathered there, which meant the streets were largely empty. Hakan used this to his advantage, moving through shadows and back alleys with the practiced stealth of a lifetime spent evading detection. He reached the Brennan house and knocked urgently on the back door. Martha opened it immediately, her face anxious. "Did you get it?" "We got it," Hakan confirmed. "But there were complications." Dutch discovered the break-in. "Within the hour, Whitlock will know the ledger is gone, and he'll start looking for who took it. You and your children need to leave town tonight, before he starts questioning people who might have helped us." Martha's face went pale, but she nodded with grim determination. "I have family in Santa Fe. We can go there." She glanced back at her sleeping children. "Give me 10 minutes to pack essentials." "You have 5, Hakan said flatly. "And Martha, I'm sorry. Sorry that helping us puts you and your children at risk. But what you've done tonight, it matters. The evidence we took will stop Whitlock from hurting anyone else." "Then it was worth it," Martha replied simply. "My husband would have wanted me to stand up rather than cower. Now go. Make sure that ledger reaches people who will act on it." Hakan left the Brennan house and began the long run back to the rendezvous point where Lily would be waiting. Behind him, Redemption was beginning to stir with new alarm as Dutch regained consciousness and raised the cry that the judge's office had been burgled. Soon, every available man would be mobilized to search for the thieves, and the real chase would begin. But they had the ledger, the evidence that could finally bring Cornelius Whitlock to justice. Whatever came next, whatever dangers they still had to face, they had accomplished what they set out to do. The rest was just survival. The federal marshal's office in Santa Fe occupied a sturdy stone building that spoke of permanence and authority, a stark contrast to the temporary structures that dominated most frontier settlements. Hakan and Lily stood before its heavy wooden doors, both exhausted from 2 days of relentless travel through mountain passes and hidden trails, both carrying injuries from close encounters with Whitlock's pursuit parties, but both still alive and still clutching the black leather ledger that had cost them so much to obtain. The journey from Redemption had been a nightmare of near misses and desperate evasion. Whitlock had mobilized every resource at his disposal, sending armed men along every known route to Santa Fe, posting guards at water sources, even offering a $1,000 reward for information leading to their capture. But they had made it, battered and hungry, but alive, standing now at the threshold of justice or failure, depending on whether the federal authorities would act on the evidence they carried. "Ready?" Hakan asked, his hand resting on the door handle. Lily nodded, squaring her shoulders despite visible exhaustion. "Let's finish this." Inside, a clerk directed them to Marshal James Thornton's office, a cramped room on the second floor where a grey-haired man with sharp eyes looked up from paperwork with obvious irritation at the interruption. His expression shifted to surprise when he took in their appearance. 2 trail-worn fugitives carrying themselves with the desperate intensity of people who had risked everything. "Marshal Thornton," Lily began without preamble, "my name is Lily Harrington, and this is Hakan Blacktalon. We have evidence of systematic murder and corruption by territorial judge Cornelius Whitlock." She placed the ledger on his desk, its worn leather cover innocuous, despite the damning contents within. Thornton's eyes narrowed as he opened it and began reading, his expression growing progressively darker with each page. The silence stretched as he absorbed the methodical documentation of 43 murders. "This is extraordinary," Thornton finally said, his voice carefully controlled. "If authentic, this represents evidence of crimes that would warrant federal intervention." He looked up at them. "How did you obtain it?" "I stole it from his office after he tried to have me killed for discovering its existence," Lily admitted. "Hakan saved me, and together we went back to get the proof we needed." Thornton absorbed this, his fingers drumming thoughtfully on the desk. "Judge Whitlock has powerful allies in Washington. Taking action against him will require courage that not everyone in the federal system possesses." "Then find people who do possess that courage," Hakan said, his voice hardening. "Or admit that justice only applies when it's convenient." Something in Hakan's directness seemed to reach Thornton. The marshal stood and moved to a locked cabinet from which he withdrew a thick file folder. "I've been building a case against Whitlock for 18 months. What I've lacked is direct evidence. He tapped the ledger. This is that smoking gun. Relief flooded through Hakan so intensely it made him dizzy. They had succeeded. What happens now? Lily asked. Now I send telegrams to the territorial governor and the federal judge who oversees this district. With this evidence, we'll have arrest warrants issued within 48 hours. The marshal's expression was grim but satisfied. Men like him believe they're untouchable. It's my job to prove them wrong. The machinery of justice moved swiftly. Within 3 days, Whitlock had been taken into custody, along with 6 associates, and newspapers across the territory began publishing stories about the corruption that had flourished under his authority. Hakan and Lily remained in Santa Fe, providing testimony to prosecutors. On the 7th day, Marshal Thornton summoned them with news. Whitlock has agreed to testify against his co-conspirators in exchange for a life sentence instead of hanging. His testimony includes details about the massacre at Silver Creek and 11 other raids he ordered. That truth, official and documented, meant more to Hakan than he had anticipated. For 15 years, he had carried the weight of Ayana's death without fully understanding why. Now he knew, and that knowledge offered a kind of closure he hadn't realized he needed. With legal proceedings concluded, Hakan and Lily faced the question they had been avoiding. What came next? They walked through the city's central plaza as sunset painted the adobe buildings in shades of gold and amber. Finally, Lily broke the silence. I've been offered my teaching position back in Redemption. With Whitlock gone, the town needs educators who can help both Apache and settler children learn together. It was exactly the kind of bridge-building work that Ayana had believed in. Hakan felt pride that Lily wanted to pursue this path. You should do it, he said firmly. Ayana would be proud. What about you? Lily asked. Will you return to the winter camp? Hakan had been wrestling with that question. The trial period had ended, and his absence would count against him. But he had eliminated Whitlock's threat, protecting both Lily and the clan. I'll go back, face the council's judgment, accept whatever they decide. He paused. Either way, I won't run from the decision. Lily smiled. You've changed since that day you found me in the desert. The man who cut me free was carrying so much pain. The man standing here now has remembered how to hope. You helped with that, Hakan acknowledged. You and Ayana both in different ways. They stood together as darkness gathered. 2 people who had found each other through tragedy, who had fought and survived together. We're family now, Lily said softly. Not just through Ayana's blood, but through what we've faced together. No, Hakan agreed. Family is forever, regardless of distance. They parted the next morning, with promises to stay in contact, to continue the work of building understanding that Ayana had started. Lily headed south toward Redemption, while Hakan turned north toward the winter camp and whatever judgment awaited. The valley appeared unchanged as Hakan approached 3 days later, but everything had changed in himself. He was no longer running from pain or hiding from responsibility. He was choosing to face both. The council convened that evening with all 7 elders present and the entire clan gathered. Hakan stood before them, knowing Lily's safety had been secured and Whitlock's threat eliminated. Niall spoke first. Hakan Blacktalon left during his trial period, abandoning the commitment he claimed to embrace. By our laws, this warrants banishment, but Hakan's mother stood. My son left to protect this clan by eliminating a threat that endangered all of us. He risked his life to bring down a corrupt judge responsible for countless deaths. He chose courage over comfort. Takala rose slowly. The question is not whether Hakan is perfect, but whether he has demonstrated commitment to our people's welfare. I believe he has. I vote for acceptance. One by one, the elders spoke. 3 voted for banishment, but 4 voted for acceptance, recognizing that protecting family sometimes required unconventional actions. The decision was made. Hakan Blacktalon would remain among his people as a full warrior of the clan. Relief and gratitude washed over Hakan as he bowed his head. He had found his way home, Not to the place he had left, but to something new, built on courage and sacrifice. That night, Haakon stood at the valley's edge, looking up at stars that blazed with impossible brilliance. Somewhere under these same stars, Lily was beginning her work of education and bridge building. Somewhere beyond, Ayana's spirit perhaps smiled, seeing the seeds she had planted finally beginning to grow. The desert sun would rise again tomorrow, harsh and unforgiving, but it would shine on people choosing hope over hatred, understanding over fear. And in that choice lay the possibility of redemption. Håkon Blacktalon had been a crow hunter, a hermit, a man running from pain. Now he was a bridge builder, a protector, a man who had learned that the hardest courage was choosing to love, despite knowing that love could be lost. He had cut loose the ropes that bound Lily to death, and in doing so, had freed himself from the isolation that had bound him for too long. Under the desert sun, beneath the endless stars, the work of healing continued. It would take time, perhaps generations, but it had begun. And that beginning was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.